Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, which also happens to be day 4 of this special run of all viewer question episodes. Well, I'm away on a personal vacation through this Wednesday, February 26th. Now, I'm answering 3 questions per episode, and the first today is from Wilhelm22, who started off with some very nice comments about the World of Warcraft manga stories I'd written for Tokyopop, which are unfortunately out of print now because Tokyopop went out of business. But Wilhelm actually happened to already have those manga, hadn't realized I was the writer on a few of the stories, looked it up, and I'm happy to say, thank goodness, enjoyed them. So thank you, Wilhelm22. But the whole thing got Wilhelm thinking about this World of Warcraft movie that's coming up. So that is Wilhelm's question. So Wilhelm says, given how the record for video game-based movies is mixed at best, true that, do you think the Warcraft movie can be a true success? I know it might be early to ask the question since production won't begin till later this month, but given what we know about the film so far, I am interested in your opinion. Thank you, Wilhelm22. I do have an opinion about this. All right, so what do we know? It's being produced by Legendary Pictures, which obviously is a fantastic production company which really seems to, understand the fanboy mind. They've done a great job with the DC movies. They were the ones behind the Nolan films. They're no longer involved there because they've left Warner Brothers after, the Jeff Robinov departure. He was forced out in favor of Kevin Tsujihara. Kevin Tsujihara got the job Jeff Robinov wanted, then Kevin Tsujihara wanted him out. A lot of drama. But anyway, now Legendary is at a new studio, and they're doing this World of Warcraft movie, and they've put Duncan Jones from Moon! I love Moon! Such a great breakthrough movie. He's also David Bowie's son, though, so I'm sure that helped to some degree with getting his career off the ground. But he's still struggled, and he has not been able to find a big blockbuster film, despite how much fanboy love he has, both for Moon, which I loved, and Source Code, which I thought was very well done, but I guessed the ending and who was behind everything, like the first 5 minutes of the movie. So I have my problems with Source Code. But anyway, Duncan Jones, finally, he was in contention for Man of Steel, the Man of Steel gig to direct that, didn't get it, but now Legendary has picked him up for this Warcraft movie. But I think his cast is where we have a bit of a problem. His stars are Ben Foster, and while I love Ben Foster and think he's a wonderful actor, and I'm so excited to see him be able to finally get to this level, to be able to try and see if he can make it at this, level of mainstream filmmaking, he might be able to, though, I'm not counting him out. But he's been acting for a long time and hasn't won over audiences yet. So that's why he's iffy. But then also Paula Patton, who certainly has her fan base. She is actually a lot in the news because she's married to Robin Thicke. Very weird relationship. It's like an open marriage, I think they've said. What a weird couple. But anyway, that's helped her career as an actress. And she's the other big star in this movie. Now, Colin Farrell was originally going to be in it. I think Colin Farrell, while I think he's wonderful personally, he just continues again and again to be a box office failure. He wishes he was a success. Sorry about that, but for instance, Winter's Tale just came out, huge failure. Colin Farrell just cannot bring in an audience. So anyway, now it's Paula Patton and Ben Foster. So I think that's very iffy casting, so I have some concern about that. Now I think also World of Warcraft, it has a very Lord of the Rings type vibe to it, but there are also, from what I've learned from my own research when writing my stories for it, and also, I've been researching for this film, I think there are some, maybe not as serious elements to it as Lord of the Rings, so I do have some question as to tone. So I think that World of Warcraft is a very tricky movie, a property to pull off. I think the tone is difficult. I think that condensing a very expansive storytelling landscape into a single movie is going to be complicated for them. And I'm just curious to see how they're going to be able to handle all these different types of characters. Elves, dwarves, all kinds. They just have the whole run of fantasy creatures. But again, the big question marks for me here are, Duncan Jones, while his fanboy love isn't a proven name with mainstream audiences, and both your actors, Paula Patton, I don't think really has any fans in particular, and then Ben Foster has his fanboy fans, but to date has never been able to help a movie at the box office. So I think a lot of eyes will be on Warcraft. I think it's still totally up in the air, but so far, if I had to guess, I think it's leaning in a bad direction. I hope that things look better when we start to see some visuals. They have The Seventh Son coming out eventually sometime from Legendary Pictures. They also made that. So they don't always get it totally right. Not everything they release is a Godzilla. Will this be a Godzilla? That just looks like the height. I think their Godzilla from Legendary Pictures is the first film I've seen from them that looks like it might be able to capture the kind of cultural phenomenon heights that The Dark Knight did. it looks that good, but I don't see that kind of talent here circling World of Warcraft. But hopefully we'll be pleasantly surprised. So that's my answer to the first question. My second question, speaking of writers and adapting material, this comes from Elizabeth W. So Elizabeth W. says, MMN question here, Morning Movie News. That's the abbreviation I use for it, so I love someone using it. And Elizabeth says, okay, so Elizabeth, long-time watcher, first time question, second time commenting, first time questioner. I love when you guys tell me how you watch the show. I love hearing how you interact with this show. It means a lot to me. That also helps me shape it going forward. So I take it all in. So Elizabeth says, like you, Saving Mr. Banks was my favorite movie in 2013, but it raises a few questions. All right, let's hear it. All right, so Elizabeth says, for instance, what exactly does it mean to have script approval? From what I understand, not many authors get it. For instance, Stephenie Meyer, J.K. Rowling, those authors did. But just so you understand where it's coming from, the question, Saving Mr. Banks is about P.L. Travers having script approval, but yet it not really working out for her with Mary Poppins. So Elizabeth continues saying, next, what are the benefits to having script approval for authors? She also points out, says it seems as though some authors that get script approval are still disappointed by the film. P.L. Travers, Roald Dahl, many others. How can this be when they approve the script? Although Elizabeth does say she's not sure if Roald Dahl had script approval. Probably not. I don't think he was ever a huge seller, so I don't think Hollywood would have given it to him. But then Elizabeth continues saying, it seems to me that offering script approval is just a ploy to gain control of the film rights. You're very savvy, Elizabeth. That's largely the answer here. But she continues saying, when researching this confusing topic, I came across an article that stated in no way does script approval mean the production of a film will be halted. It is just a scheme to gain rights, and it doesn't seem like much of an incentive for the author. Grace, please help me to make sense of my confusion. Smiley face with a big smile, the D instead of just the parenthesis. All right, so Elizabeth, excellent question, and you are right to be nervous about this fake offer from Hollywood. But still, even though it often doesn't work out, if you're an author, you should still take it. You still want to be involved in the script writing process because it's better than nothing. It's better than Hollywood just taking your stuff and running. But as even the most seasoned screenwriters will tell you, when a script is done and approved and everyone says, oh, they read the last page and they go, that's great, let's make this movie. Often, that is not what ends up on the screen. Things change on set. For instance, I have a really fascinating interview. I was really happy with the way it turned out with the screenwriters of Red 2. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video. And if I forget, I'm sorry, because I'm editing these all together. Just go and search Red 2 in my videos. And they talk about how they were on set to help with the screenwriting process and to deal with any problems that arose. For instance, losing a location, losing an actor, or having to change an actor's shoot dates. They were there to not only change the script, but to also keep in mind the bigger picture of the script as the movie as a whole, the first film, and the potential third film. So they're very lucky to have that kind of collaboration and be included that much. That's very rare in Hollywood. They have, these days, very little respect for writers. But anyway, things change all the time due to production problems, as I said. Also, sometimes a star will come on set and be like, I don't like my lines. I want to improvise. For instance, there was a lot of talk about how in Men in Black 3, Will Smith was just going around changing it to such a degree that it raised the budget and extended the shooting schedule because he just was making so many changes on set. And then, of course, there could be changes in the editing room. Things might not come together well and they make changes. Also, in reshoots because they have a problem. Look at what happened with World War Z, the entire third film of the film. The last third of the film had to be rewritten and reshot because it just wasn't working. Although they brought in new writers who were very heavily involved with that change, Damon Lindelof, for instance. But with the instance of P.L. Travers is depicted in, Saving Mr. Banks about Mary Poppins, I think, Disney had been trying to get this movie made for decades. I think this was a desperate bid to get her to finally come over, and it worked. Offering her script approval got her to come over there. But I think it's very clear from the way he interacted with P.L. Travers, the final product. It's no secret that Walt Disney had an idea of somewhat of the movie that he wanted to make and was going to add those elements no matter what. For instance, the animation. He was always going to include animation no matter what promises he made to P.L. Travers. However, you should take heart, Elizabeth, that as is evidenced in the movie, it still would have been a very different movie without P.L. Travers' input. While she didn't get the exact movies she probably wanted, or certainly wanted, she is the one clearly who is responsible for giving Mary Poppins the tremendous depth and sophistication that it does have as a film. You can see from the movie the original kind of route they were planning on taking was very superficial. and didn't have any of the, heart. It wouldn't even have been about, Disney didn't even realize that it was about saving Mr. Banks, not saving the children. And that is something P.L. Travers had to point out to him. So there is an influence that the author makes. That's why the author wants that. They want to at least be part of the process, even if their final script approval isn't honored. But just like, this is all Hollywood, it's swimming with sharks is a very true statement about Hollywood. It's a very difficult business. You often get the movie the closest you can to what you want. People really get the movie they want. That's also just part of the collaborative process, but there's a lot of underhanded business going on there. It's the same as we discussed earlier in these viewer questions episodes about, what development means, whether or not that's an empty promise. Sometimes it is, and sometimes script approval is an empty promise. So I think you should be, my advice here, how I see this situation, and my advice to anyone who finds himself in this situation is you shouldn't be so concerned with what your contract says. You should be, but I think you should also couple it with, some concern for who you're working with. And at the same time, though, there's a great quote from J. Michael Straczynski about the time that came out about the time that everyone was discussing how Alan Moore had been treated by DC and the Watchmen rights and all that. And J. Michael Straczynski made a very good point, and he said, at every point in your career, you sign the best contract that you can. And I think that's a great bit of advice. While it would be great to always get wonderful, honest contracts that have everything that you want in them and are honored totally, that just isn't the reality of the situation. You should bargain for the best kind of contract you can get, and of course, down the line, as you get more and more successful, you'll be able to get more of what you want. But never, ever, Hollywood and all business, all of life is compromise. I mean, that's the game, knowing when to compromise and when not to compromise. So that's the trick here, not just for screenwriting, but anything. Really knowing when to hold your ground, but when also it's important to, it's more important to move forward and to get that deal, to get that adaptation. For Alan Moore, to get that series, that deal that, did wonders, made him a comic book icon. And in the future going forward, he did retain the rights to his characters. At least I believe so for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And he left mainstream comics as a result of that, but he's still done quite well. But anyway, it's a very difficult, obvious situation, but just get yourself in there. It's always get in the room, get to the next level. That should be your goal. That's paramount. You need to be moving forward. You don't want to be shut out. All right, Elizabeth, I hope that's helpful to you. And I think Saving Mr. Banks is a great movie. Not only is it my favorite movie of the year, but if you're interested in this kind of a situation and this question, I suggest you watch the film so that you can draw your own conclusions of how you think the scenario worked out and how maybe P.L. Travers could have better negotiated it, or maybe you'll see that she did the best she could. All right, so that's the second question of the day. The third question comes from Terrence Barber. And Terrence says, hello, Grace. I'm from the UK and adore your channel. Thank you, Terrence. That means so much. I have a viewer question. Excellent. Terrence says, I'm super curious to hear what your thoughts are on the upcoming Disney movie adaptation of Big Hero 6. What are your hopes for it? We haven't heard all that much about it or really seen anything from it. I have a sneaking suspicion that Disney is going to keep all the trailers and details to themselves until the last minute, just like they did with Frozen. Thanks for taking the time to read this. XX. Oh, of course. Thank you for writing it, Terrence. And thank you for your patience. As you can see, it did get answered. I think the comparison with Frozen is excellent. And just like Frozen, I have some concern that they're showing any material or any advertising because the film's just simply not there. I think it's still being tinkered with. As we know, Frozen was tinkered with up to the very end. There were clips that were released that, just months before the movie that had been fully animated. That's no Blizzard, that's my sister clip. Disney made me take that clip down, actually, because I didn't want it out there because it didn't end up in the final film, and it showed Elsa more in a villain mode, of course, the mode she wasn't in when the final product was released. So I have some, that was a very new territory for Disney. They did stray considerably from their usual formula, so I think that they were, understandably so tinkering with it to the last minute. But unfortunately so at the same time. You really got to have this stuff together. Hollywood, you're supposed to be professionals. That's why they work on these animated movies for years, like 5 or 6 years. So the fact they're still tinkering with it to the last minute is, troublesome, but hopefully it'll work out for Big Hero 6 as well as it did with Frozen. So I am a little nervous about them not showing things, because as you'll recall, at the Disney Renaissance, they would show things way in advance. We would see, storyboard art, we would see character design really early on to get people excited about that. And we have seen some character design from Big Hero 6, but mostly the settings, the San Francisco, the San Francisco-Tokyo hybrid they've come up with. We haven't seen anything about the characters. Now, this is very tricky. I hope it's an Asian cast. Big Hero 6 is an Asian team, and I think Disney would be a horrible move for them to whitewash these characters. I think just really a mistake. And so maybe they're trying to make sure that they get this right while being faithful to having them be Asian characters and the cultural aspects of that while still appealing to Western audiences. So it's a very difficult recipe and they might still be fiddling with it. But that's my hopes for it though. I hope that we truly see a hybrid of, for instance, Disney animation and Miyazaki animation. I want something that, really brings anime and introduces it in a mainstream way, as Disney can do, to the mainstream audience that don't go and watch anime. They don't go to the Anime and Adult Swim. They don't watch Akira. They don't watch Miyazaki's films. They're totally unaware of this incredible, huge amount of talent, animation talent, and quality content that's been produced on the other side of the globe. So I hope Big Hero 6 is kind of like a gateway drug, but in a good way, a gateway drug to anime. That's what my hopes are for this film, and I hope that Disney, therefore, has a great responsibility to be respectful of anime and to make sure that when people, you're only a gateway if you serve as an introduction. If they totally change it and make it and just take it for their own, so that when people go to anime they see no similarities, that would just be a shame, and it would be ruining what Big Hero 6 is about. So that's what I'm hoping for. I hope we get a really great story, and I hope also we have comic book aspects, some of the comic book tropes, archetypes. I hope we see that there, because Big Hero 6, there were some interviews and they asked about how Marvel's involvement was, and it seemed to be that Marvel was only an advisory was only weighing in on Big Hero 6 in an advisory position. They weren't intimately involved with the story or the production. And I guess that's why they got that product or that those brand of characters from Marvel, because Marvel themselves hasn't done much with it. So maybe they were willing to let it go. They're like, okay, Disney, you can play with this because we haven't. So that's what I really, as I said, Big Hero 6 to me, I want it to be I guess a better, more happier term is a bridge from Western animation to Eastern animation, so that we can all, so that we can stop being so divided. Because I think that's the next frontier for animation, where it needs to go next. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for your questions, Wilhelm, Elizabeth, and Terrence. And maybe your question will be answered tomorrow. I hope you'll tune in to find out. Bye.